Alors, bonsoir à tous, Salamat Sore. Welcome and thank you for coming to our evening lecture that is going to be held by Professor Jérémy Gignoux. This conference is part of a cycle of conference that you may already know. It's the Homme, Territoire et Société cycle of conferences. It focuses on the humanities and on the societies of Indonesia through the work of French researchers. So before opening the lecture, I would like to thank our partners, l'École Française d'Extrême-Orient, known as FEO, with whom we actually co-organize all the events, and the French National Research Institute for Sustainable Development, l'IRD, for their technical assistance on this conference. So before we start, I would like to say a few words about Professor Jérémy Gignoux. So he is a research fellow at the French National Institute for Agricultural Research and Paris School of Economics. So trained as an engineer at École Centrale de Lyon and an economist at Sciences Po. He worked at the Development Research Group at the World Bank before joining the Paris School of Economics in 2009. So he conducts research in applied economics and development economics on social and education policies, the adoption of agricultural technologies and rural development. So now I am going to let him present his lecture titled Benefits in the Wake of Disaster, Long-Run Effects of Earthquake on Welfare Rural Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Salamat Sore. I'm sorry, I started to learn some Indonesian, but I didn't have enough time, so I need to remind the words. Okay, so I'm going to... So I'm going to give this conference, which is on the effects of natural disasters in the long run on households. But I want during this conference to talk also about the methods we are using in applied economics and in development economics. Okay, so for people who are not familiar, I think it's important to tell about what methods and what data sources we are using. Okay, and please don't hesitate to interrupt me if you have questions, if there are things that are not clear. Do not hesitate to ask questions and while I'm presenting. Okay, so this paper, this research is on the long-term effects of earthquakes in Indonesia on households. Okay, and this work is actually going to be, I'm going actually to present two works. One which was advertised and which is a published work, published in the Journal of Development Economics in 2016. It's a joint work with a colleague, Marta Menendez at Université Paris-Dauphine, okay, which looks at the economic impacts of earthquakes. And then we have a second work which is ongoing, which looks at the effects also in the long run of disasters, but on human capital investments, on education, on health, okay? And we also plan to look at long-term labor market effects, okay? And which is also joint work with Marta Menendez and also with Almedina Music, who is at the World Bank. Okay, so to motivate, let me begin by motivating these works. So when we think about natural disasters, we think mostly about negative effects. Okay, and in the short and medium run, the effects, most of those effects of disasters tend to be negative. Disasters can destroy productive assets. In rural areas, which are going to be the focus of our work, They can destroy crops, livestock, productive assets like machinery or buildings. And then disrupt lower productivity of farms. Okay, and they will also affect non-farm businesses. They can also destroy local infrastructures, roads, irrigation, energy grids, and this will also affect negatively production, but also this will disrupt marketing chains. Okay, and then the idea that we are going to investigate in the first of those works is that those effects can persist across time and generate some poverty traps by lowering productivity. Businesses and households can find themselves in situations in which they cannot recover in the long run. Okay. In the short run, in medium runs, disasters, when they affect the human capital of individuals, like their health, when they create casualties, or they destroy schools, for instance, or force parents to have their kids work. They can also have negative effects on human capital, okay, and health, and those effects can also persist over time. But so the effects are mostly negative in the short run. However, they can be in some sectors. They can be also they can be some positive effects in some sectors. Like after an earthquake, you can have an increase in the demand for some food stuff, okay, food goods. So the prices of food products can increase. Some producers can benefit. They can also create work in for reconstruction. Okay, so they can increase employment and salaries in reconstruction. So some sectors might benefit. Some papers have found evidence of such effects. But here, the questions we are going to be interested in is mostly the one of long-term effects, okay? And in particular, the one of poverty traps, whether individuals and households remain trapped into poverty after a natural disaster. This can happen, such poverty traps can occur if productive assets are depleted, so that production is completely disrupted. Okay, and then if this brings businesses to low level of productivity, and so in many sectors we can have some returns to production that are high at the beginning, but there can be also returns to scale, okay, so that larger firms can use more productive technologies. And so when a business loses its productive capital, it can happen that it doesn't have any more effect to those more productive technologies. Or it can also happen that smaller businesses are confronted with large transaction costs. Like small farmers often have larger transaction costs to market their products. It's more costly to market 1 kilo of a given food product for them than for a large firm. Okay, there are returns to scale in marketing. So when you have such production functions, it means that the productivity gets very low when business assets are destroyed after an earthquake. And then it can be very difficult for small businesses to recover after such disasters. And it will be all the more difficult that those small businesses do not have access to capital if they cannot borrow. And often this is the case for small businesses. Banks do not lend a lot to small farm businesses or even non-farm businesses, or they lend at very high interest rates. And this reinforces those possible poverty traps, okay, which are actually low productivity traps, okay. And then it can also happen that public infrastructures are destroyed, and then communities can find it also difficult to reconstruct. They also need funding for reconstructing those infrastructures. And so this can also reduce productivity in the long run. Okay, so those are what we call poverty traps. And this is really the hypothesis we want to test in this research. Whether after a natural disaster, the affected communities are going to be trapped in such low productivity situations. Okay, so I'll talk about the other studies later. But in practice, so there are other mechanisms that could at the opposite, help recovery. It can happen that actually returns, well, productivity is actually lower for small business, is actually larger, sorry, for small businesses, okay? So that you have a decreasing returns to scale. Yeah. In economics, we often have we often work with such production functions. At the beginning, returns to a given economic activity are high, and then they decrease. And so when you don't have this situation, in particular with different technologies for small and large businesses, and when small businesses do have access to capital, then they should be able to recover, even if they have access to, they could access to capital little by little and reconstitute their stock of assets, of productive assets, little by little, borrowing little by little and reinvesting progressively. Okay, so if this is the case, the poverty traps we just talked about would not appear. Then, after disasters, you can have some external aid coming in, or reconstruction occurring, and this external aid, okay, the aid and reconstruction can be funded by the national government or other donors. Okay, so then there can be transfers to aid the reconstruction and aid, which would help recovery. And then some people argue that there can be some processes of like a creative destruction, in the sense that like the destruction that comes with a disaster forces individuals or small businesses to renew their productive capital, or to adopt new methods of production that are more effective, more efficient. Okay, and that would help recover and increase productivity. Okay. In the same way, disasters could push some individuals out of low productivity jobs or low productivity areas. Some people have found, in the case of the Katrina typhoon in the New Orleans city, that actually the situation of some households that were touched by this disaster had improved several years after the disaster, and also that the education outcomes of some children had improved. Because apparently the disaster had forced some people to search for a job out of a poor, very poor neighborhood, or to reconstruct a job that was ill functioning, that had low resources, and that was not efficient before the disaster. Okay, so all those effects are reasons that could, at the opposite, help recovery after a disaster. Okay, so the questions we are going to ask in these two projects are: what are the long-run effects? Are they positive or negative? And what are the mechanisms that drive those long-run effects? And for okay, so in the published paper, we looked at the effects on economic outcomes, okay, and on the well-being of households, on consumption and incomes in the long run. And we focus on rural areas, mostly because rural areas are those in which poverty rates are higher. Okay, those are also areas where which are going to be more exposed to global warming and to the disasters that are linked, associated with global warming. And also because I'm an INRA researcher, so I've got I'm interested in rural areas. INRA is a research center in agriculture. But in the follow-up paper, we are going to look at the effects of disasters on human capital outcomes, education, health, and also in the long run on incomes through human capital investments. Okay, so to give you a preview of the methods we are using, we are going to use data on earthquakes, which comes from seismologists. So seismologists, they create catalogs of earthquakes, which record all the large earthquakes that happened since a long time ago. Like I think we have complete data since the 50s, at least. And then we are going to associate this data on earthquakes with microeconomic data from household surveys. Okay, so this is data that was collected through questionnaire surveys among households. And in particular, in Indonesia, you have a great data set, which is called the Indonesian Family Life Survey, which started in '93, and which tracked the same households across 5 surveys, spanning over more than 20 years. So in '93, '97, 2000, 2007, and there is a last wave in 2014. Okay, so you can track individuals across time. And we are going to associate the two data sets. Okay. And this way we will be able to see how individuals that were affected by an earthquake, how they fare 1 year, 2 years, and 10 years after the event. Okay, and then we are also in this work going to exploit the fact that unfortunately Indonesia is probably the country where the largest number of earthquakes occur. Okay, every year you have like 20 sometimes but 20 large earthquakes. Okay, and they can happen over very large areas. and at times that are really unpredictable, okay? And this creates like quasi-experimental conditions that okay, some areas, some groups of individuals are going to be affected, okay, and then you will be able to compare those individuals with some individuals in nearby regions that were not affected to estimate the impacts of the earthquakes, okay. Okay, so I'll skip the preview of findings. Okay. I'll keep the suspense. Okay, and then we relate. So there is quite a bit of work on natural disaster in social sciences. Okay, you have quite a bit of work on the effects of disasters on human capital. Okay. Many studies show negative impacts of disasters, and not only disasters, also civil conflicts, okay, wars, on human capital, on health and education outcomes. Okay, also famines. For Indonesia, you have, for instance, a paper by Machini and Young, which exploited rainfall data and which found that individuals who underwent a drought when they were very young, when they had like before 1 or 2 years, in their first 2 years of life, then they underwent they had poor health conditions. Okay, they were okay, poor. So they suffered when they were younger. Their health suffered. The health effects persisted when they were teenagers or children, and this also affected their schooling and educational outcomes, and also their labor market outcomes when they were adult. So this paper finds some persistence of negative effects of shocks that affect human capital. Okay, but in this paper, in the economic paper, we are interested in disasters, in the effects that affect mostly economic resources, not human capital, and you have less evidence on those effects when the losses are mostly through productive assets and like our physical resources and not human capital. Okay. However, there are some papers that have that are related. For instance, you have a paper by Miguel and Roland who looks at regions in Vietnam that were more severely bombed during the war, okay, and looks at whether those regions are doing worse, like 40 years after the war, okay, whether there is a persistence of war destructions in those regions, and they actually find that there is no such persistence, that the Vietnamese government has managed to reinvest. Probably by redistributing resources from other regions to prevent those regions to remain poorer in the long run. And similarly, as I already said, there is some evidence that some victims of Katrina recovered. Then there are some studies that use macroeconomic data, like growth indicators at the country level, and that are going to compare growth across different countries. And okay, and here the literature is quite debated. Whether so it seems that some small countries, like for instance Haiti, which has a lower capacity to reinvest and to reconstruct, are undergoing negative effects in the long run in terms of growth. Okay, How much time do we have until? I'm being a bit short.
Ouais, encore 5 minutes.
Sorry?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Like 10 minutes.
Okay, this is quite short. Okay, so this is a map of seismic risk in Indonesia. So as you see, so the most exposed regions are the south of Sumatra and Java Islands, and the north of the Sulawesi. Okay, so I'm not an expert in seismology. I had to talk to seismologists to prepare the data for this work, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Okay, so here the darker areas are the regions most exposed to very severe earthquakes. So as I said, we are going to use data from a catalog of earthquakes, which comes from the US Geological Survey Agency, and which registers for decades all the major events with their date, the location of the epicenter, the depth, the magnitude of the event. Okay. So these are really the strength, the aggregate strength of the earthquakes. Okay, and okay, so you see here, this is a list. So the macroeconomic data we are using is from a household survey. Okay, so these households are not in every district of Indonesia. They are in some specific districts that were surveyed. However, there are still a number of those households that were touched with one of those earthquakes. Here we consider only earthquakes since 85, because our microeconomic data they start in 93. Okay, and we wanted to get earthquakes about 10 years before. Okay, so there are about like so earthquakes are going to be they are characterized by a global magnitude. Okay, but then they also create local ground tremors. Okay, so like the local movement of the ground, which can be categorized into the destruction they generate. Okay, and you have a scale for those the potential destructions of those earthquakes, which is called the Mercalli scale. Okay, so this is the scale. So the degree 6 already indicates moderate damage to vulnerable structures. From level 7 and 8, you already have heavy damage to vulnerable structures, and from category level 9, you have very heavy damages. Okay, so then we are going. We are going to use the characteristics of earthquakes to map actually the local ground tremors they generate, and we do that through a formula that was estimated by seismologists, which is called the attenuation formula. Okay, which tells you like 100 kilometers away from the epicenter, given the characteristics of this earthquake, how violent is going to be the ground tremor. Okay, so you get a peak ground acceleration, so the acceleration of the ground, and then you can convert this acceleration of the ground into this Mercalli scale to get the potential damage that the earthquake generates. Okay, and then we look at where the individuals in our household survey live. Okay. We know exactly in what village they live. So we know how violent was the ground tremor in this village. And here, this is the list. This is a list of earthquakes that generated ground tremors of at least level 7. Okay, there are 25 of those starting in 85, and you have about 50 such earthquakes that, for our sample, generated such ground tremors. Okay, these are the characteristics and the dates of those earthquakes. And then, as I said, we use the data from the family life surveys. They are representative for 83% of the Indonesian population. The surveys track individuals across waves. The tracking rate is really, really good. Like you can follow individuals. You lose only 13% people over 15 years. Okay, and then for each individual in this panel survey, we are going to reconstruct their migration history. So we know exactly in what district they were, or even sub-district they were living each year. Okay, because in the survey we ask when they migrate, and if they migrate, the survey is tracking them. Okay, so we know exactly where, in what sub-district they were living each year, and we know whether there was an earthquake in that year. Okay, so we can reconstitute their history of exposure to earthquakes. Okay, so we cover all Java, most of Sumatra. Okay, so the more densely populated areas of Indonesia. And then the survey also collected information on economic outcomes. So we have information on household welfare. Okay, in particular, we have it collects detailed data on consumption, and including food and non-food consumption. It also asks questions about income, labor incomes and other incomes. We have also information on business assets. Okay. So we are going to restrict the analysis to provinces where at least 100 people underwent a large earthquake. Okay. And we are going to restrict the sample of analysis to individuals aged between 25 and 54. Okay, and then we are going to do a statistical analysis linking the exposure to earthquakes with those outcomes. Okay, and we are going to look at the microeconomic outcomes of individuals 1 or 2 years after an earthquake. 3 to 5 years after an earthquake, and 6 to 12 years after an earthquake. Okay, so when we consider 1 to 2 years as to measure the short-term effects, 3 to 5 years to measure the medium-run effects, and 6 to 12 years to measure the long-term effects. Okay. So this is a table that the surveys also ask questions to individuals about whether they underwent, people report whether they underwent a disaster, whether it was an earthquake, and whether what were the losses this event generated. And this table checks that we have a correlation between the earthquakes that really occurred, as measured with the seismological data, and the earthquakes that the individuals report in the household survey. Okay, when they were exposed to a large earthquakes, they are going to report more frequently such an event and losses. However, you have many people that say they didn't underwent losses, even after a very violent ground tremor. Okay, it's only 12 or 13% that report losses after a very large ground tremor. Okay, not all houses are destroyed, and not all businesses are destroyed. Okay, so these are the numbers of observations in our sample that underwent an earthquake of each intensity each year. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. And then we are going to estimate what we call an econometric model. Okay, so basically a statistical model where we relate microeconomic outcomes to the exposure, to the experience of a disaster. Okay, so we do some. So as I said, those earthquakes, they happen quite randomly, in an unpredictable way. So they are like experiments. And we check this. Here we check that the areas that are going to undergo disaster in the future, okay, they don't have different outcomes than other areas. Okay, so it means that there is the areas that undergo a disaster and the ones that do not undergo a disaster are similar before the disaster. Okay, so we verify the experimental conditions. Okay, we also, so you could think that disasters kill some people or have people migrate very far away and then you lose them from in the survey, but this is not the case. Actually, we do not have what we call a higher rate of attrition. Okay. The survey manages to re-interview people that underwent a disaster. So let me now get to the results. So these are the effects on well-being measured by per capita consumption. Okay, so here, sorry, I didn't. It would have been easier to have a figure. So you'll have to read the numbers in tables. So here you should read the numbers as percent. So when it's 0.10, okay, or 0.09, it means that the outcome decreased by 10% or 9%. Okay, and when is so here you have a negative sign, so it's a negative effect, and here it's you have a positive sign, so it's a positive effect. So, and here the first line gives the effects of the earthquake in the short run, so within 2 years. The second line gives the effect in the medium run, 3 to 5 years after the disaster. And the third line here gives the effects in the long run, up to 12 years after the disaster. And we find that per capita consumption of households which were affected by a disaster, it decreased after the event. It decreased by about 10%. Non-food consumption decreased more than food consumption, and it decreased by 13%. But we see that in the medium run, after 2 years, those effects already disappear. Okay, you do not have any more an effect. And after 6 years, and up to 12 years later, those effects, the effects we estimate in our data, are actually positive. So it means that the individual who underwent earthquake are actually faring better than individuals that didn't fare such an earthquake in the long run. Their levels of per capita consumption are higher, and they are higher by also about 10%. Okay, which is quite puzzling. Okay, so you find positive effects in the long run. So this is for the effects of earthquakes of intensity 6 or higher, and this is for the effects of intensity 7 or higher, and the effects are quite of the same magnitude. It's just that we have less people that are touched by a very more intense earthquake. Then we look at the effects on incomes. And we actually find a decrease of agricultural incomes, really strong decrease of agricultural incomes in the short run, by almost 50%, 40 to 50%, both of independent producers and actual wage workers. Some of those effects do persist in the medium run, in particular for independent farmers. But again, in the long run, those effects disappear, and for independent actual producers, the effect turn positive. Okay, for other sectors, the effects are less present. Okay, but you still have some effects on hourly wages in the long run. Okay, in the non-agricultural sector. Okay, when we put stars, it means that the effects are statistically significant. Okay, so statistically, you can say when we say it's when we put 1 star, it's at the 10% with a 90% precision certainty. The effects is positive. Okay. When we have 2 stars, the effect is significant, statistically significant, at a 95 level of percent level of confidence. Okay, so we find negative effects, economic effects in the short run, but effects that turn positive in the long run. I'm going to be fast now, so we can verify that those effects are also this pattern of negative and positive effects is also present for the stock of assets, okay, in particular for farm business assets. So here we can decompose into land assets and buildings and movable assets. Okay, again negative effects in the short run, and some effects that turn positive in the medium and long runs. So now let's get to the mechanisms. So Indonesia has a capacity for aid and reconstruction. It's a larger country. You have aid programs that go mostly through in-kind transfers. You also have cash transfers, but a lot of social assistance is through in-kind transfers. Okay, in particular to food subsidies. But you also have grants for business recovery after disasters. Okay, through in particular Kekamatan development programs. Okay, local development agencies. And those programs can redistribute resources towards affected areas, so they can aid recovery. And actually, we are going to find evidence, and we can also have some reconstruction of infrastructures. Again, in a large country like Indonesia, the government has a capacity, or also province governments have a capacity for reconstruction, which is not necessarily the case when a large disaster affects a small country like Haiti. Okay, and in the data we do find evidence of reconstruction of infrastructures. In the survey, there is also a community module where village chiefs report on the infrastructures, and when there has been in the localities that were touched by the disaster, 80% of village leaders report that repairs have been made to infrastructures, and that the infrastructures are now better than they were before the disaster. Okay. And then we have macroeconomic data on the aid that is received. Okay. People say whether they received social assistance and whether it was cash or subsidized food assistance. And we do find that households that were affected by an earthquake, they received more of those assistance programs than households that were not affected by such a disaster. Okay, so we find evidence of that some aid is going on. Okay, aid is channeled toward those affected households and areas. And then we have also measures of the quality of local infrastructures, like the quality of roads, the quality of the electricity grid. Roads quality can be measured by the time people need to travel to the nearest market, and we do find evidence of those infrastructures. You have more paved roads in the long run in areas, in sub-districts that were touched by an earthquake, and the time to go to markets decreased, and you have more often you have a higher share of households with access to electricity. Okay, so some evidence of reconstruction. You could wonder whether people migrate and do not come back. This is not what we find. We find that some households move away after a disaster, after an earthquake, but generally this is for only a short period of time, like 6 months. Most of the households come back after. We do not find a persistent effect on out-migration of those earthquakes. To summarize, we find that small businesses do manage to reconstitute their stocks of productive assets, partially through self-assistance. Okay, I didn't insist on this, but we find that the stock of financial assets decrease in the short run. So it means that households also resort on own financial resources to recover. But they also recover through the aid they received, external aid, which comes through private transfers, aid towards businesses, but also through reconstruction of public infrastructures. So to conclude, we find that these results suggest that there is no persistent poverty traps for those numerous earthquakes that occur in Indonesia. So those results apply to the many moderate and large moderate earthquakes that we investigated. But if you were to focus on one major earthquake, like the Yogyakarta one, for instance, the effects might be more severe. Okay, then you could have some more persistent effects for really the extreme earthquakes. Okay, it seems that public aid and reconstruction policies do play a significant role for reconstruction. Like the Kekamatan Development Program. We should emphasize also that there were some innovative social policies that were implemented in Indonesia, where the targeting uses rigorous criteria really to target the poorest households, but also leaves some room for local leaders to select who really needs assistance after a disaster. Okay, when you design public policies, often it's difficult to know whether you should have rigorous criteria, whether the government should decide on who it should help based on strict criteria, or leave some room to local leaders, with the risk that local leaders might use discretionary power to favor some households. Okay, then I should insist. So the effects that we find, they are in line with the work, they are consistent with the results that were found, for instance, in the Vietnamese case, okay, where they didn't find persistent effects of a bombing in Vietnam. But it doesn't mean that the effects are positive for Indonesia at the national level as a whole, okay? Because our effects can be driven by redistribution from one region to another, okay? So it can be that the net effect for the entire country remains negative, okay? Here what we do is comparing areas that are affected with areas that are not affected. Okay, and then so we saw some evidence of different channels, but it's difficult with our data to really isolate one specific channel that drives the results. Okay, and then we have so just in one sentence. So now we are using in ongoing work. We are using data on health and education outcomes. To see whether individuals that were touched during infancy by major earthquakes, they are going to have poor health outcomes and poor educational attainments, which has been found in some other settings, in some other countries. And also for the case of rainfalls and droughts in Indonesia. So we have preliminary results which do suggest negative effects on a set of educational outcomes. There are also we can also associate this to other large-scale surveys, even larger-scale surveys, which are so in Indonesia you have in particular the SUSENA surveys, which are budget surveys, which interview every year like more than 200,000 households. And with this data, you can also look at the longer run effects on labor market outcomes. And so we are currently working on this. So I think I have already spent too much time. So thanks, and let's discuss this. Thank you very much.
So if anyone has any question to ask.
Thank you. My name is Anita, and I actually come from the city in West Sumatra, and I experienced the earthquake around 2009, okay. 10 years ago. The magnitude is 7.9. It's a kind of big for me. So when I see your presentation, I feel like I think that my city is going slower in the development, even though it's getting better in individuals. But I can see that the development in education and infrastructure is going a bit slower than the city in Yogyakarta. And do you have any suggestion to speed up the development? And can you explain to me why the growth of the city, the growth of my city in Padang is slower than Yogyakarta? And my second question is, if we look up into the city that prone to earthquake in overseas, let's say Christchurch in New Zealand or Japan, we can see that the development is kind of faster than in Indonesia. Can you explain to me why the country could speed up the development? And here we can see it's going a bit slower. Yeah, that's it. That's my question.
So maybe I can. Let's take questions of one of you. Oh, shall we take
You want to answer?
Yeah, maybe like two questions.
Okay.
We already have two. I can answer those. I can start.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Nur Afni. I am from one of the frequently earthquake happen in Indonesia, that is Aceh. Here the question is, based off the result finding that you showed to us, is there a positive side, right, in such a long time, years, and what kind of the good effect, yeah, because of the earthquake happen or other disaster? And the other one is, if I'm not mistaken, is there such a regulation from KDP, Kacamatan Development, yeah, I forget that, there is address after disaster, and sometimes like they provide food, right? But is there any research what kind of food that better for the people get after disaster? Because nowadays in Indonesia we often get instant supply foods first. Yeah, that's the question. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so I think it's yeah, really interesting to discuss with you who have really experience, life experience in the effects we are looking at in this research. But so one question was on macroeconomic growth, like comparing Indonesia with New Zealand. So first, I'm not a macroeconomist, so I don't know much about growth at the national level. So you should not ask. I'm not a good person to to ask. What are the policies that generate more growth or in one? Yeah. But I think I think Indonesia is one of the country, like emerging countries that have known quite higher rates of growth in the last 20 years or so. So I think Indonesia has been catching up with developed countries with more, in general, higher rates of growth than developed countries. So then, I think the policies that generate such a such growth are not the. This is not the question of this presentation. But so then you could ask, what are the effects of disasters if you compared Japan, for instance, and Indonesia? Are the effects on the macroeconomic situation? Are the effects larger for or more negative or more positive for Indonesia than for Japan? Okay. So obviously, this is, as I said at the end, this is not a question we can answer with our data, because in our data we compare regions that were affected and regions that were not affected. Okay, so we do not compare Indonesia after an earthquake with another country without like, and it's difficult to do because we do not have a country that is exactly like Indonesia without an earthquake at the same date. So it's really difficult to identify empirically those macroeconomic effects of disasters. So then, if we go back to the more micro level, okay. So you said your city that was so in West Sumatra, that's it, and that underwent an earthquake. You said the growth has not been fast and probably less fast than Jakarta. But here I'm not comparing to Jakarta. So I'm comparing to to a rural area of the same province. Okay, so if you were so in your experience, if you were comparing your city to another city of the same province, but with less destruction, okay, which were maybe further away from the epicenter of the earthquake, would you say that there has been some reconstruction in your city and things have improved, as my results seems to suggest? Or would you say that no, there has been no reconstruction and things are worse than they would be? So, if you do not compare to Jakarta but to another city in the same province and to a rural, to another city of the same size.
Sorry, what I meant is not Jakarta, it's Yogyakarta, that the city that prone to earthquake too.
Okay.
Not Jakarta, Yogyakarta.
Okay, so and this city was also affected,
Yeah.
and then there have been more reconstruction in the city.
I think so.
So you mean that more resource? So the resource have been more channeled or concentrated on the city, and not on the smaller cities, or
The city.
like the capital city has benefited more.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So this is here we focus on the rural areas. Okay. So this is not one thing we have studied, but it's quite interesting. This is something that we could look. And so, would you say that it's because like the local government they are in the main city, so they are going to favor the main city when they decide on aid and reconstruction? Would you say that this is the case? How would you explain this?
Sorry?
How would you explain that the main city received more help? It's because like the politicians are based in the city and they.
Maybe there is a politics effects on that, not only the investment to grow the infrastructure. Maybe there's a politic effects in my city growth that help the development, not only because of the earthquake. When I think of it.
So what political effects or processes?
Well, maybe it's more like public policy that my city could. I don't know if I look up into them much, but I think that, for instance, the educational institution in my city, it's not growth that good. I mean, there's no more high school that growth there, and when we look up into another city, they have a new schools.
Okay.
Yeah, like that.
So schools have been
Yeah,
reconstructed.
it's reconstructed.
In the main city, but more so in the main city than in the
Yeah.
smaller cities.
Yeah, it's in the main city and also in the rural area.
Okay. Also in the rural areas. Okay.
In the rural area, they get reconstructed, but
Not in the smaller cities. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is I think you have a lot of work now which is done. So there is like political economy, which is it's a field of economics, but which looks like more at political mechanisms. Like, for instance, like policymakers, policymakers, what are their incentives? How do they decide to allocate resources? And so their incentives are often to get re-elected, okay? But you have a branch of economics that study those behaviors and those mechanisms. And I think this is a really interesting, these are really interesting mechanisms. This is really a flourishing branch of economics. And so these are important and mechanisms. Yeah. But yeah, we would have to study this more. I cannot validate now.
Any other question? Wait, he had a question first.
Okay, thank you. I have a question and I have to comment for the last question. I'm from Yogyakarta. Okay. I think you, what is it called? You asked the question on the wrong person because he is from France. What just to say from France, but we know the problem is it's not about political and economic condition because our culture is different between. I don't want to be like, like split people from Java or non-Java, but this is quite different. Like in Java, my city in Jogja, we have on what is called like gotong royong spirit. Like when we can help, we help each others to help the others to get bounce back better. Like we can for example for Merapi eruptions, yeah, and we have a value to do together. We don't accept help from the central government. So we doing by ourselves. Like we doing with our material or whatever. So we can recover it very soon. It is the issue. Maybe I'm mistake, but this all I see. Yeah. Sorry, I don't explain what this is. Wait. Yeah, this is it. Maybe I don't know in Padang. Maybe you know better what's culture in Padang. Maybe if not mistake, they're not strong. I don't know. It's strong enough. I don't know because it's not my city. Yeah, but I know. I've been there. I'm in Merapi earthquake. I've been in Merapi eruption, Jogja earthquake. I've been there and I know the people. This is my comment. Yeah. And another question is for professor from France. Yeah, from another country. I would like to ask you about how do you get the data? I have graduated from disaster management in one of university in Jakarta. I cannot mention it, but how do you get the primary data? Like you have a long survey from 1985 until 2014. It's like
Yeah.
20, more than 20 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you involve National Disaster Management, we call it BNPB, or you get the data from BPS, like Badan Pusat Statistik, or what is Indonesia Family Life Survey? What is this? I don't know.
Yeah.
And or you collaborate with, or you involve World Bank or any NGO, non-governmental organization to get the data, or you make a what is called survey, interview, blah blah blah. Can you explain about the method? Because if we had all of data, we can like analyze, we can input, we can processing on by SPSS, social program developer, and can make any solution. This is it. I just curious about the method that you use it and to collaborate with. This is it. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you. So very good questions. So on the data, so here in this, the sources we use for this work are publicly available. The catalog of earthquakes can be downloaded. It's on a website. It's called the Centennial Catalog. It's on a website that was created by seismologists, and it's not only for Indonesia, it's for actually worldwide. Okay, so we have records of all all earthquakes worldwide with really the location and exact dates, and so you can download it on the internet. I can give you the website. And the macroeconomic data we use indeed are the data from the Indonesian Family Life Survey. So this survey was not conducted by BPS, by the Indonesian Institute of Statistics. It was conducted by the RAND Corporation. Okay, so it's a corporation which is based in California, I think, but which has projects like development projects worldwide. Okay, and they collected, and this data is also public. Okay, you can also download this data on the internet. Okay, it's in public access. You can download all the micro data with information at the household level, and for the now 5 years of data, and this is one of the best source of microeconomic data for emerging or developing countries. Okay, you have a few countries with such a rich source. Okay, so I think there are many questions that can be investigated with this data, and I really encourage you to look into it. Then it has many modules. There are a lot of information on a lot of questions that were asked to households. Like the interview of households was taking like probably like something like 3 hours. Okay. Then in other work we are using data from BPS. So we are using data from the SUSENAS surveys. So the data from BPS, you need to purchase it. Okay, and it's quite expensive. So I've purchased several waves of the SUSENAS surveys, and then it comes with some limitations. BPS often does not release information on the exact location of households. Okay, so you wouldn't have the village identifiers. Okay, which is not the case in the Family Life Survey, where we can really identify the precise location. Okay, but the Statistical Institute of Indonesia also collects a lot of data. There is a budget survey, the SUSENAS. You have the SAKERNAS, which are the labor market outcome surveys. You have a census of villages, which is called the PODES, which can also be obtained from BPS. And all those data are quite rich sources. And in development economics, so my field is development and applied economics, you have quite a bit of work done on Indonesia, and often from researchers in Europe or the United States, because Indonesia is a country where you have a lot of microeconomic data. So I think you should be a country with where you should do a lot of applied research. Okay. Sorry, I forgot. I took too much time. So yeah, no. So you on your other question. So you mentioned that. So there is some. So when there is a disaster, you have a lot of cooperation between households. Okay, people they together they organize to reconstruct. That's it. Okay, so that's really interesting. So maybe because I'm a microeconomist, I tend to I first focus on individual decisions, and I don't focus first on like cooperation within communities. Okay, but those processes are also important and interesting. So maybe indeed this is something we have not investigated enough. So it's a really good, really interesting to learn this. But this would suggest that there is more collaboration when there is an earthquake or a disaster or another disaster. when things are going fine and without a disaster. So what you suggest is that disasters actually create links and more collaboration between households. So is it? Do you think this is the case?
So,
Yep.
my turn?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Ian Tuliana. I am from BPPT, the agency for assessment and application of technology in the division of technology for disaster risk reduction. It is not a question, it's maybe an additional. I do not much know about economy, but I see the disaster in the point of view in science and technology. That maybe have a relation with economy. Yeah, probably. So, and then after the tsunami that hit Palu and Sunda Strait in 2018, the government of Indonesia funding the research and funding the additional tsunami detection. So that fund is come to us to constructing more tsunami buoys, and also I developed another technology that is cable-based tsunami meter, collaboration with Japan and United States also, and maybe France, not yet. So the disaster is also improve the technology in the country that hit that by disaster, like Japan, for example. They can export their technology to another country, like to Indonesia. I learned about cable system in Japan, for example. But it is also Indonesia also has export their technology. If you know BMKG, because there is many disaster in Indonesia, so they improve their technology, and then they can export their technology to another country, to as I know, as into the oceanic country. Maybe I hope that the buoys that I made now is the third generation of the tsunami buoys can in the future export to other country. So as I mentioned before that it can be related to economy also. That is the additional for me, and I have also additional in the last discussion about Padang and Jogja. I disagree with from Jogja. It is not about culture. There are many aspects why Yogyakarta, it's as you mentioned before, grow faster than Padang. So if we see in the media, in the media you can read that Padang is the more prone country for the tsunami in the world, you know. So that's why the investor think twice to invest in Padang. So that is I think the main reason why. And also the country, excuse me, the city is also different. The center of this city, Padang, is more close to the beach, to the sea, than Yogyakarta. So and also the other aspect. So we have to see more wide many aspects that why Yogyakarta grow faster after disaster than Padang. That's I know as a functional, of course. That's it. Oh, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Mega. I'm junior legal analyst from Badan Keahlian DPR RI. Thank you, Jeremy, for give your energy and your time to research about disaster in Indonesia. As we know, Indonesia is a ring of fire for disaster, and I think this is your never-ending research to research disaster in Indonesia. And actually, I have question before about are you finding the rehabilitation of disaster is obstacle by regulation, but as you mentioned, you are not focused on regulation or the law, but you focus on economics. So I turn my question become in your conclusion, you talk about investment, and this is really related with our President Jokowi about nowadays. He always said about invite investors, and for this I want to ask about how to invite investors from outside country to invest the place who affected by disaster, and do you have suggestion about that to like we explain the good thing about Indonesia to the investor, even Indonesia is a ring of fire, because to make people outside the country trust Indonesia is really high potential economics growth is kind of difficult. So maybe you can be the represent for us to explain that Indonesia is not really bad about the ring of fire, but we still have a lot of good places and good potential economics to hike. So I hope you get my question. So, thank you.
Okay. Okay, maybe I can answer those two questions.
You can please answer and conclude because we have
Okay.
to finish. Thank you.
So your question is, so I'm not an expert in technologies for prevention and of prevention, but I think your question is interesting because it's you underline that a country or region that undergoes earthquakes develops an experience, okay, and it develops new tools and methods which can be then valued. It can be exported or they can be transferred to other. They can benefit other regions. So maybe you could have also benefits benefits from the experience of a disaster in one region, in the other regions. Okay, you improve prevention. I guess this might be okay, a part. So those effects, we would not capture them well, because they would maybe they would benefit also other regions, and this would mean that you, in the long run, you have more prevention and things. But it's, I think it's also, probably this is the case. Like in Japan, you have very major earthquakes, but still the buildings are constructed in a way that most of them do not collapse. So this is probably there are some gains both at the country level and from this learning, and because also Indonesia is a large country. If you have one small country that really undergoes a very strong earthquakes, then the costs are larger than the learning, than the benefits of learning. Okay, but probably for a large country like Indonesia, you do have those benefits. So this is interesting. So on your question, on investments, local investments. So I'm not either an expert. I'm sorry, but we are quite specialized in economics. But I'm not either an expert in international trade and in foreign investments. But what I read is that I don't know when. Just as I read, many of you do. So I don't know much more than many of you. But I read that there are probably some factors that facilitate investments of foreign firms, like FDIs. So some factors that would favor investments would be like infrastructures, for instance. If you have good infrastructures, that would help investments. And also human capital seems to, if you have a labor force which is well trained, with a good education, then it will probably attract investments. But then, then you have a lot of works on. So it's really not my area, but a lot of work on facility to invest and like also the labor market. Whether if you can, if you have a trained labor force. With wages that are not too high, probably to attracts investment, and this could also apply to some of the areas. Like if there is after a disaster, you can also the labor market can be, at the beginning, there are less jobs, okay? So then there are a lot of people that are searching for a job, okay? So then this could attract investments, okay? If capital is mobile and can come in the affected areas, capital could take advantage of the fact that you have a labor force that is seeking for jobs, and maybe is willing to accept lower wages. Okay, so this speeds up. This explains also some kind of natural recovery. Okay, just by market forces, they generate some recovery. But then it's also you can have also mobility of the labor force. Okay, if the labor force is more mobile, this can also help recovery. And we know that also education helps mobility. Okay, workers that are better trained are more mobile and more able to take a job in a different sector. Okay, and for instance, there is work in development economics on the education programs that were developed in Indonesia since in the 70s. Okay, you had large school construction programs in Indonesia, and some studies find benefits in the long run because those programs, they have improved educational levels. Okay, and also they have and then also parents have when you have more educated parents, this helps also for the education of children. So it's not only for the generation, directly for the generation, but for the next generation. It has also, it has fastened the adoption, the acquisition of education, and those are important factors. I think infrastructures and human capital, education are important factors for transformation of the economy in general, because you have more mobility, you can more people that can move from one sector to another or from one area to another. Okay, and I think there are also some works that compare mobility in Indonesia. For instance, there are some works on mobility in India, and in India you have some less migrations. Okay, less mobility of work. People are more attached to their villages or state or province. Okay, in Indonesia people are a little more mobile, but I think politics that help with mobility are also in general good for growth.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming. We have to end this session, so sorry for those who had questions and can't ask them. So thank you for coming, and we hope to see you next month on the 6th of November for our next conference held by Dr. Ariadna Burgos, who's going to tell us about self-fishing in Indonesia and Timor-Leste. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming. Thank you, Professor Jérémy Gignoux. And you can enjoy some refreshments in the lobby now. Thank you very much.